Buying Warhammer 40k miniatures? New versus used? Time for another Wonders Off discussion. Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, another Wonders Off discussion, and in this one we're going to talk about buying used and new miniatures, the advantages and disadvantages. Before that though, if you would like to keep up to date with the wonders of Warhammer 40k, then please give me a sub and hit the bell button so you don't miss an upload. Okay, so let's start off talking about the advantages of buying new miniatures. So you decide you want to buy a new model. Now this is your hobby, and one part of the hobby is actually building and painting your miniature. And that is something that a lot of us do like. And that's one of the main advantages of actually buying a new miniature, is you can obviously unwrap it, you have the model on the sprue, and you can build it from scratch. You can make your own model, and of course you can paint it. And there lies the enjoyment of the hobby for a lot of people. Now when you think about buying new miniatures over used miniatures, you generally think that the new miniatures are more expensive. Now you can obviously pick up much better deals than the standard Games Workshop prices. However, I know that some people like to shop at Games Workshop purely the fact that they have a great local Games Workshop and they like to support it. And indeed, buying new is a great way to support your favourite shops, whether that be a local shop, an online shop, or a store like War Games. Now I buy all of my stuff from War Games now, and although it's not a local store, of course I am sponsored by War Games, but forgetting that, it is a great shop, and I like to support Martin, who owns the store as well. And indeed I purchased everything via his website. If you haven't seen the website yet, it's www.wargamesuk.co.uk, and he does some great discounts on not only GW stuff but all the other gaming systems as well, so it's worth checking it out if you haven't done so already. So there is a lot to be said about purchasing from your favourite place to buy and supporting them, even if it does mean maybe paying a little bit more than you would a second-hand model. Now of course, once you've got your kit, the fact that it isn't already built like a second-hand one potentially would be, means that you've got all of that fun of clipping the models off, of building your models, maybe making your models unique that no one else has, and then of course painting your models. Now usually with most kits you also get an abundance of extra bits with them, and that means you're going to build up a nice collection in your bits box for either conversions or for trading, etc. in the future. Now that's one advantage of buying new. Now when you buy a new kit, you generally get all of the weapon options for that particular model. Not in all cases, unfortunately, but when you do, that's fantastic. It means you can choose your weapon of choice. It also means you have the option to magnetise your model, so you can have all of the weapon options. But generally you don't get all the options with your used model. Usually it just comes with a fixed weapon, which is usually glued in place. So there's some great advantages to buying new. You get the pleasure of opening up the box, cutting the bits off the sprue and building your model and eventually painting it, maybe doing some unique conversion work with the model, some green stuff on there, and then you have the advantages that you tend to get all of the bits afterwards, and of course, as I said, you get all of the weapon options in some cases. So that's great. So what's the disadvantages of buying new? Okay, so let's have a look at the disadvantages of buying new models. Now we've already talked about the cost of buying new models, and whilst yes, you can buy them new with discounts and get some really good deals, there's no doubt that if you look around you can buy used models for a lot cheaper, and that obviously has to be an advantage for them and a disadvantage for buying new. But putting used models aside, even buying new sometimes doesn't work out to your advantage. For example, you may buy a box of models, say some Primaris Marines, and there might be 3 models in the box and you need a unit of 5, which means you've got to buy another unit of 3, so you're buying 6 models when you only need 5. So sometimes you have to pay for more models than you actually need. Now once you purchase your model, whilst a lot of us do enjoy building our models, not everyone does, so this could be their own personal disadvantage of buying a new model. Now it's probably fair to say not many of us like to remove mould lines. In actual fact, that's my personal worst side of the hobby. I'd love to know what your personal worst side of the hobby is. Let me know in the comments box below, it'd be great to hear that. But yeah, removing mould lines, that's my worst part. Now of course it does take an investment in time to build a model, to build a unit, or indeed to build an army. And not everyone has that investment of time available, or not everyone enjoys building their models. So you have to take that into consideration when you're purchasing a new model. But on the whole, I think there's more advantages to buying new models than there are disadvantages. Okay, so that's new, but how about used? Okay, so let's have a chat about the advantages of buying used or second-hand models. Now most of us like to buy either via eBay or some other trading site or Facebook page, or indeed just trading models with your friends. And there definitely is a thrill to this part of purchasing your model, to finding the model, the unit that you want, to working out how much you want to pay for it, to try to bid to get it for that cheaper price, or try to trade something maybe with a lower value so you can try and get a better deal. And whilst there's a lot to be said for going into your store and purchasing a brand new box of models, I think there's an awful lot to be said about the process of gaining a second-hand model, especially when you get a good deal. Now whilst most of the time it is cheaper to buy second-hand models, that isn't always the case, and you do have to be a bit savvy. You do have to do some research before you purchase your model. Don't assume because it's second-hand it's cheaper. In actual fact, I've seen this for myself. When I was looking to buy my Ford World avatar, I think it was about £48 on the Ford World website, and I was looking at some second-hand ones, and indeed the one that I was watching on eBay went for more money than it was actually on the Ford World website. So you do have to be a little bit careful. Now sometimes when you buy a second-hand model it will already be painted, and if it's a good paint job this can increase the price that you actually pay. But that can be quite advantageous, having an already painted model. You can buy it, you can place it in your army, and you can play it straight away. And indeed some people find that a great advantage, people that don't actually enjoy painting, or they just want to get their army on the table very quickly. Now potentially you could buy a used model or a used unit just as a stopgap, just to put in your army so you can play with it until you buy your own new version and you can convert it and do whatever you're going to take. Because as I said, it does take a long time to do those new items, whereas if you buy a second-hand one already built and painted, you can plonk it in your army and you're ready to go. Now one thing that you can't buy new which you can buy second-hand are classic miniatures. Well, unless GW do a special run of them. Now personally I love classic miniatures. I think it's a part of our history, and I'm quite happy to have a few classic miniatures in my armies. Now the cost of buying classic minis can vary. Sometimes if it's an old model which is out of production you might have to pay a little bit more for, but then sometimes if that particular old model now has a brand new sculpt, sometimes you can get those old models really cheap. That's what happened to me with the Necron Wraiths. I bought 6 of those old metal Wraiths for I think it was 99p, and that was because everybody wanted the new plastic Wraiths. So you can definitely buy a bargain if you look out for some of those classic models as well, but again you do have to look around. Now the last advantage I want to talk about when it comes to buying used has to be the bits. Sometimes when you need a particular bit it can be very difficult to find new, or very expensive to find new. It's usually very easy to get second-hand bits, and it's also generally very cheap. I mean, usually you can buy a head or an arm or a leg for about £1 on eBay, which is really great. So that's the advantages, but what about the disadvantages? Okay, so the disadvantages of buying used, and yes we're going to go there, pro-painted. Please be very careful when you see any model that says pro-painted on eBay. Zoom in, have a closer look. I mean, I've seen some really awful pro-painted models on eBay, and generally they can be quite expensive as well. People tend to inflate the price because it says pro-painted. Now there are some genuine pro-painted, very high quality models on eBay, like Powerhouse Miniatures for example. Ian, he does an amazing job painting his models, and he also sells them on eBay. You can really tell the quality of those models. But if you take a closer look at a lot of those pro-painted listed models, generally they're not, they're just painted, and in most cases not to particularly high standard. And now some people won't mind that, but other people will, and of course that means you've got to put a bit more time into maybe stripping those models. Now whilst you can zoom in and have a look at the pictures, you can't 100% tell exactly what condition the model's going to be in either. Now of course this doesn't come into account if you've already seen the models in the real life, if you're trading with a friend for example, but if you're purchasing it from Facebook or from eBay, you've only got the pictures or description to go on. Once you receive that model, sometimes the condition isn't quite as good as maybe they said. I mean, I've had it where maybe like a turret might be super glued on and the super glue's gone over the edge. You couldn't see it on the picture. Of course that is all repairable, but it is a little bit more work that we have to invest. Now personally I don't mind a little bit more work. Indeed, sometimes you can make that into your advantage. And that's what I did with my Eldar flyer. I'll link you up to a video about my Eldar flyer just there. That flyer was made from a beaten up, really badly glued painted Vulcan. Now I took that model and I made it look like this. I'm really happy with the results, but of course that did take a lot of work, and that is something you have to take into account when you're buying second-hand models. Now some people are quite happy not stripping their models down, just having whatever paint job they get. The disadvantage of that of course is you end up with a bit of a mismatched army. You might have one unit which is really well painted and to the theme of your particular force, and then you might have another unit which maybe isn't as well painted or is in a different theme. So you might have a craft world which has got some Beltan and some Samhan in, etc. Just where you bought whatever models you can get at the right price, but it doesn't necessarily look so good on the table. Now the other thing with buying second hand is you generally don't get all of those bits, the leftovers, the spare parts, the weapon options. And that makes it more difficult if you want to do conversions. It also makes it more difficult if you have the wrong weapon choice on the model or you want to switch that weapon choice around. So there can be a lot of work when it comes to buying used models. Indeed, you may find that the model may not even be on the right base. You may end up with a square base when you want a round base, so you have to remount it. So something to be mindful. Although you can buy a bargain used, sometimes you end up actually doing more work than if you'd bought a brand new model. Now, I'd love to know what you think about this topic. Do you prefer to buy used or do you prefer to buy new? Put some comments down below, let me know your thoughts and your opinions, and we'll be back next week with another Wonders Off discussion. Beam me up!